Welcome back to Not a Straight Line with me, Pete Daly-Dickson. This is the show that explores the non-linear journeys of artists and entrepreneurs to inspire you as you zigzag through your own non-straight line life. And this week, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Ania Hulsman for an inspiring conversation. After a chance encounter on LinkedIn, Ania and I bonded over our shared experience of ADHD on an intro call, and I knew that I wanted to get her on the podcast. Ania's journey has been rich with experiences from growing up in an immigrant family in London to navigating various roles in her career. She humorously refers to her life as more drama than EastEnders, but beneath the surface, wow, there's just so much more. What really connected us was our shared understanding of neurodivergence, as I said, particularly ADHD. We exchanged stories about the challenges and insights that come with it, both in work and in life. Despite the ups and downs, Ania's story is ultimately one of growth, accomplishment, and joy. Today, she stands fulfilled and happy, and I'm just so excited to share her journey with you. So join me, please, for this uplifting conversation. Ania Hulsman, welcome to Not a Straight Line. I'm so pleased to be here with you. We connected randomly on LinkedIn, didn't we? I think we either posted on the same. I don't know how it works really, but anyway,
the magic of LinkedIn.
The magic of LinkedIn, yeah. And we had a brief half an hour or so intro call a week or so ago, and
became friends instantly.
We became instant friends, yeah. And now here we are taking a deep dive into your non-straight line journey. Welcome.
Yeah, I am like the definition of wonky.
Regular listeners of the podcast know that there is a question which I send my guests before we start. The question to you is, when you saw that question, what immediately came to mind for you?
So I've got a few because, I've zigzagged a few times in my life. I think the first one was like when I was 30, and it was such a personal victory for me, a moment of taking ownership and not being like a passive participant in my life. And it was so hard that it was a really pivotal moment. And that relates to leaving a relationship that I was in. So I was in a relationship with a guy for 7 years. I loved the guy. I believe that he loved me too. And it was toxic. It was like, I'm sure that we brought out the worst in each other. And, interestingly, he brought out some really good stuff in me as well. But also there was some really bad dynamics going on in that relationship. And everybody around me could see it. And I was the only one who didn't see it until I saw it. Actually, I did try and break up with him 3 times. And that was a third attempt. And I by that time, I realized that the only way I was going to get away was to tell him to not talk to me and not have any contact. And it was really hard because I did still love him. And there were positive things in him and positive things in that relationship. But ultimately, the balance was wrong. And I was always going to be ultimately unhappy. He was very, very controlling. That was the problem there. And because I was insecure, I justified his controlling behavior.
Well, you were quite young when you got together. If you've been together 7 years, you were 23.
Exactly.
So where were you when you were 23? What was a 23-year-old Ania doing, and what was she at?
So then you'd have to understand a little bit about my history. So my history is that I come from an immigrant family. My parents are Polish, and they were very, very working class, although both intelligent. And we ended up in a place in London. We moved there when I was 7. In fact, we lived on council estates up until then. But somehow I remember when I was 7, we moved to a part of London where I felt really unsafe. And it was like I jarred, like I couldn't figure out how to be in the world at that age. And we lived opposite a cemetery. It was horrible. I didn't manage to make proper friends at school.
You didn't?
I didn't. No,
Yeah.
I didn't. And subsequently, there were years that I just see as dark, And so, again, another part of the context is that my parents should never have married. My brother was, I think we're all neurodivergent in the family. He probably had like the really hyperactive presenting ADHD, constantly getting into trouble, extremely charismatic and charming. So everybody really liked him, but he was also getting into trouble. And I just was like the wallflower. And because my parents were stressed because they're in the relationship they shouldn't have been in, my brother was, causing problems. And I just tried to create harmony by being a good girl and being agreeable and pleasant and doing well at school and, not causing any problems, not taking up any space. So I shrank completely.
Did you recognize that at the time?
No, of course not. I had no idea what was going on. I just thought life was hard and shitty. And I had no idea who I was. And so I was very amenable to manipulation as I grew up and got older. And I was, so I was very malleable and I was manipulated by this guy. And I let him because I just, my self-worth was pretty low. And that was the first moment where I was like, I got to stand up for myself. This is not going to lead to a good place in this relationship. And I thank the stars that we never ended up having children together, because then we would have been tied together forever. And it would have been, I'm sure it would have been very, very stressful. So that was the first moment when I really stood up for myself. And I said, I want more than this. I deserve more than this relationship is giving me.
Was there any trauma, so to speak, that led to emigrating from Poland? What was the instigation behind that?
Yeah, communism was the big trauma.
Right.
My dad actually had a passport he had a Welsh passport because his parents went to Wales during the Second World War, and he was born there, and then they went back straight after the war. So he was able to move freely, and my mum was a rebel always. So she was just like, fuck this, I'm leaving. And ended up in London. But she always felt like a second-class citizen for not being British and not speaking. She spoke fluently. She's a very intelligent woman. But because she always knew that she was a foreigner, she always felt like she was, second class.
Did you feel that too?
Did I feel? I always felt different. So I always put that down to being, living in a Polish family in England. So it was really interesting. There were things that I didn't experience until I went to a friend's house. I never had beans on toast until I was, over the age of 10. I didn't know what the word for ladle was in English until I was, in my teens. What is this instrument? What do you call this in English? I have no idea. I know what it is in Polish. Don't know what it is in English. And there are some sort of cultural differences. There are many cultural differences between, the Polish culture and the English culture. One of the things is that please and thank you is not as necessary. It's still used, but it's not as necessary in the Polish language, because you've got the polite forms of the language that you can use. So my friends thought I was rude when I was at school, and I was constantly being told off. Say please, say thank you. I'm like, okay. And of course, I never realized at the time that I was dyslexic and that I probably had ADHD and maybe even being a bit on the spectrum. I had no idea about these things. I just thought I was weird because I came from a Polish family. And, and I spent every summer in Poland growing up. Those were the normal things for me. And I didn't do the normal English people things.
And what were you? So you didn't do the normal English things, whatever the fuck that means. But what were you into? What was Ania at that age into? What sparked your interest?
I was a bookworm. I lost myself in fantasy, in books. I feel like I lived vicariously through everything that I read. That was my safe place. I would be left alone and get plenty of dopamine hits from the stories, and it was safe, right? It was safe. There was nobody who could get upset with me, and it was quiet, and I could relax, and that's what I did. I just read and read and read and read and read, and I was constantly in a book for years. So I'll tell you a funny story. This was actually very, very painful for me at the time. I went to middle school. So we lived in an area where they still had middle schools. And I went to middle school. In the first year of middle school, I made this friend called Laura. She was from an Irish family. This was a Catholic school. That's the context, right?
Mm-hmm.
We were like everything together. And I loved her, and as curious little girls, it must have been 8, 9 years old, we were experimenting, sexually. I now know as a parent that that's pretty normal, right? That it's, that kids do that. But the parents, the Irish parents of this child, I think got very concerned that, there's some lesbian activity going on there.
Mm.
And we got separated in the next year of school. But it was so, now I've got a Polish word in my head, not an English word. It was like, we were like ripped. I felt like she was ripped away from me and there was no explanation for it. And then she refused to talk to me. So the parents must have said to this girl, stay away from her. And I don't know what else was said, but it was so brutal. I never, ever recovered while I was still at that school. And then I was a loner for years. And there was maybe, I don't know whether there was shame. I'm trying to think now whether there was shame around my sexuality around that time. I don't think I was conscious of that. I think that came later. Then my next good friend happened when I was 13. So if you can imagine, like between the ages of 7 and 13, I had no close friendships. I was apart from that 1 year, I was a loner. And it was really, really, really hard. And it just, like in my memory, things were shit at home, things were shit at school. All I had was books.
I'm trying to imagine what that was like.
Pretty shit. It was pretty shit.
Did you have any sense of hope, though, that it might be different?
I always thought when I become an adult, everything will be, I will then have control. Yeah. I will be able to. And I was always fantasizing about being rescued by a knight in shining armor because I read a lot of books and the Disney movies were shit at the time, as in, not very female empowered. I remember being on a bus and fantasizing about a knight in shining armor. So listen, literally a person in armor in 1991 galloping up to the bus that I was in, going, Ania, I'm here to rescue you. Come with me. And then everything would be great. That's how I spent my time.
Interesting to me that you were thinking that when I become an adult, I'll be okay. When you said that an example of an adult relationship you have with your parents, obviously that's the closest adults that we have to us, was not good.
I've always been very close to my mum, but she was not very available because she was very stressed. They were very stressed about the finances always. And she was in an unhappy marriage, right? Up in like they separated when I was 13. So, things improved then. But yeah, I mean, I love my mum, and she's going to move in with us, and I'm going to take care of her, and that is my absolute dream and commitment towards her. But she wasn't always available.
And what did you see? Did you see anything in your mum that made you think I want to be like that?
No, I don't think as a child, I processed it any more than that. It was only like, freedom lies on the other side of childhood. So I was wishing my childhood away the whole time. I found being a child way too complicated. Little did I know.
Yeah, spoiler alert. Yeah, we'll come to that. So we've touched on the 30-year-old Ania. We kind of skirted over the 23-year-old Ania because when I asked you that question about where you were when you got into this relationship that ended when you were 30.
I had no idea who I was is the answer to that question. I just had no idea.
So you took us back to the 7-year-old. You said we need to get a bit of context. So you had this mission to grow old so that you could get
become an adult. Yes.
Become an adult. Where did you go after? So you went to middle school, you went to secondary school, I guess.
Yeah, I did A-levels.
Although you felt very alone at school.
Until I was about 13. So at the age of 13, I moved to a new school and I then quite quickly fell into a group of really great girls whom I'm still in touch with now. In fact, I went camping with a few of them this summer.
Wow.
Which is really amazing. Yeah. And they were the saving grace for me. Like suddenly I felt better in myself. There were still some challenges, like definitely, which I could go into now, but I was much, much happier. And sixth form was really fun. And then I went to uni and it was horrible.
Good, bad, good, bad, good, bad. Yeah.
Exactly.
Welcome to your life. So, what did you study? What were you into? What sort of? So you talked about books.
So I was into books, and I loved art, and I spent very many lunchtimes in the art room. So obviously, I went and then did languages for A levels. That was the obvious choice
because you already had a couple.
Well, I was bilingual, so that did help me, and I found I studied Spanish, so I just found that really easy, and then French, which turned out to be really hard at A level. And in fact, I was like, my teachers had to pull me aside and said, you're going to get a really shit grade if you don't pull up your socks. And so it's this kind of weird situation where wasn't used to having to work really hard to get good grades at school. But I also didn't know I was dyslexic. For people with dyslexia, a language like French happens to be very difficult because all the endings sound the same, and and that was one of my biggest problems. I did work really hard. I got a B in French A level at the end, so I was really proud of that. But if I had worked as hard on the Spanish at A level, I would have gotten a higher grade. I also got a B in Spanish without too much effort. I have to say, I didn't put that much effort into it. And then I studied Spanish, Hispanic studies at university. Retrospectively, I loved art and I loved CDT, like craft design technology. Like those were like my absolute favorite places where I was in my zone. Retrospectively, I should have gone down that route, but I was told by very well-meaning parents and other adults, oh, you've got the brains to do something academic, so you should do something academic because you'll have better work prospects then. And so as the very pleasing, needing to please person who didn't know who they were at the time, I was like, oh yes, that sounds like a very good idea. That's what I'll do. And I did end up using Spanish for a short period in my professional career because I then later on qualified as a teacher and spent, I think, 2 years as a teacher. And then I have barely used it since.
How do you feel with hindsight being forced in a way to go down a path that wasn't you?
I was very compliant. I wouldn't even consider it being forced. I didn't even question it. I just had no idea what I was doing with my life, and I was just kind of floating along and following the currents where they led me. I wish that I had known myself better at that time, and that there had been people who had said to me, what are you passionate about? What gives you energy? Do that. But yeah, sadly, I think it wasn't the time then. Those weren't the times then, and I didn't have those people around me.
Is that was going to be my question? Is that how we do it for our young people today? Asking them those sort of questions.
Yeah, because if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life, right? Especially if you're neurodivergent, which I clearly am. I had so many problems in my work. So when I finished uni, kicking and screaming, it was a horrible experience. Like both academically, I found it like torture, and also socially, I really, really struggled. Like I made friends only with the mature students, none of the people who were my own age.
So it's echoes of first call again, like life repeating itself, Groundhog Day almost.
Yeah, in a way it was, and I found it very, very difficult. And then I qualified, and I was like, I was so qualified. I got my degree.
You got a degree, yeah.
And then I was like, okay, what do I do now? I have no idea. So the obvious option was to follow my then boyfriend to Italy because he was Italian. So I spent 6 months in Italy doing weird jobs. I was like assistant tour manager for a music agency, and I like music, but I was never into music. I didn't clue. Like I toured with Nigel Kennedy, the violinist, with the names are escaping me. Some famous people, basically, and I had no idea who they were. I was even invited to a party once, And there was a guy there I started a conversation with. I'm like, so what's your name? And then he gave me his name. And what do you do? He's like, oh, I'm an artist. I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. Have you done anything interesting recently? He's like, I won the prize. I don't remember the name, the biggest art prize in the world.
Turner
recently.
Prize or something, is it?
Yeah, something like that. And I'm like, oh, no idea. I was so completely clueless.
He probably found it quite refreshing, though, that somebody was just talking to him like a normal, in inverted commas, human.
Maybe. I was just, if there was one word to describe me as a young adult, it would be clueless. Like, I was just clueless. I had no idea what I was doing or where I was going, and really lacked an identity as well. Like, what did I stand for? I didn't have anything like that. And then I ended up working in a factory for pocket money because I was too young to get a proper wage. It was really weird. And then I left Italy on account of the drama that was going on at home with my brother, who, by the way, fathered his first child when he was 16 years old. And
wow,
it was like high drama in my family. It was always high drama. Yeah, and then I worked in a state agency for like 3 months, and then I worked in this place that taught basic skills through computers, like literacy and numeracy. I think that was for a year, but I found that like understimulating, like it was a bit too easy for me. And then I qualified as a teacher. For some reason, I thought that I should go and study again after that previous very difficult experience. I don't know why I did that. I do really find stuff interesting. So I found this topic really interesting, but the process of writing essays and stuff was always really tough. And planning lessons for me, again, was absolute torture. And I think I just like passed that like through the skin of my teeth. I have no idea how I managed to pass that qualification. Didn't have the confidence to apply for jobs until the very last moment. So all the good jobs were gone. Ended up in a really tough inner city school in Islington with boys who were bigger than me. And I was this like tiny, cute little young teacher. And I got, say the word assaulted in the corridors is a bit strong, but I had my bum pinched and I felt violated on a number of occasions, right, in this school. And I was a bit terrified. They had panic buttons in the classrooms.
Wow.
And I was like on the corner wing of this school where like you had to get through like 5 other double doors to get to this room. And I was terrified.
God.
I'm just not equipped to deal with those kids. I bless them, they need support. I just wasn't the right person for it. And then, listen, the drama doesn't end there, Pete. Like, then my brother dies.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And then I'm like about to start a new job and I go completely fall to pieces. So I'm like starting this new job at a new school, which is a much better job. So I applied for a new job and I got a job in a good school with a really good support system, the big languages department. And I just like crying in lessons. And, I'm like, I hold it together for half of the day and then I lose it. And it was, and I had to keep going off on like leave. And then, after 6 months, I was like, I can't keep coming back. This is not working.
Well, what happened with your brother?
He was depressed, drunk and stoned and accidentally, I don't believe he did this on purpose. He accidentally fell off a cliff. So, it was a really tough moment for the family.
How old were you?
I was 24 at the time.
And were you close to your brother?
I was kind of close in the sense that I loved him and he was my family, but he was a pain in my ass as well because the problems when he was younger with being like in trouble at school never stopped. He got expelled from a couple of schools, got involved with the wrong people, started smoking dope when he was 14, fathered a child when he was 16, got married when he was 18, had another child, got divorced by the time he was 20, I think, and was living in squats and stuff like, and he was super paranoid as a stone person. And so, it was a lot of drama. And the kids, there were kids involved and They are wonderful adults now, by the way. I love them both. One of them lives with me now. But it was, it was a tough time.
So eventually you realized you had to leave, you had to stop work, you had to finish.
I just couldn't work. I had such a low tolerance for stress that like the smallest thing would happen and I would start crying and not be able to stop. So it was a really, really tough time. And then it was like, okay, so what do I do now? Like, I qualified as a teacher. I spent the last 2.5, 3 years of my life, like, dedicated to education. And now what do I do? And that's one of the really positive things about that really difficult relationship that I was in at the time, was that, he made some really great suggestions for me for what I could try out professionally. I ended up going into recruitment. And I stayed in one job for 6 months and then tried another job for 6 months. There were ethics in that industry which I just didn't sit well with me, and I struggled with that. But then I managed to get into recruitment for teachers, and that then suddenly made sense. I was working for a great company, a great team, and I loved that job. And I was finally thriving. And then after 18 months, they said, you're not hitting your targets. You're not selling enough, because I was in the sales team. We're going to put you into the admin team.
You don't want to say that to someone with ADHD.
And then everything fell to shit.
Would it surprise you to hear that this sense that you described earlier about not really knowing who you were or what you wanted to do at that young age is quite a common theme in these conversations that I've been having with people? Would it surprise you to hear that's the case?
It wouldn't have surprised me at all. And I think that, what happens is that at a certain point, when you have no idea who you are, you start trying to figure out who you are. And then you start trying things out and testing, like with food. Do I like this? Do I not like this? Am I good at this? Do I want to spend time on it? Can I be bothered, right? Because with you're neurodiverse, and you have like lower dopamine than other people, you have to be very motivated to do the thing that you're doing. Do I care about it, right? And so it doesn't surprise me that not only do people need to test different things out when they haven't figured it out when they were younger, but also, if you're neurodiverse, you get bored of things. So you could be in one place for a while and really love it at the beginning, and then go, actually, I don't find it interesting anymore. I'm not learning. I'm not progressing. One of the fortunate things for me is that I am intelligent. So I kind of could wing it. I winged it. What's the grammar there? What? Do you say wung it? Winged it.
It's one of those words. We know what you mean. I know what you mean anyway.
Yeah. I winged it through school without having to work that hard.
Yeah.
And I think also that was a problem, because I never learned to work hard because I didn't have to. And then when it came to the work life, I just I continued to wing it, and I didn't know how to work hard because I'd never had to up until I say that I had to work hard with my A-level, my French A-level, and I had to work hard at uni, but it didn't come naturally to me. It didn't come easy. I did not develop very good executive function skills. Like, I didn't know how to organize myself. One of the saddest things for me, consequences of the poor executive function skills, is that I once missed a wedding of a friend because I didn't use diaries very effectively. And I didn't put it in the diary. I forgot about it, literally forgot about it. And then I got a message from her, hey, didn't see you at the wedding. I was like, oh, I forgot. And she never spoke to me again. And I really liked her. And I feel so bad because obviously, she'd invested money. Weddings are expensive, and me being there, and I'd forgotten, like, what an insult. I could see how someone would be totally offended by that. But it was because I had no executive function, or very minimal executive function skills. I did not know how to organize myself. I did not know how to plan. I did not know how to set a goal and then work towards it. It just was completely foreign to me. So I've had to learn that the hard way as an adult. I'm still learning.
Do you think that is true of the human experience even now, this sense of as you what you described in terms of not knowing yourself and not knowing what to do? Or do you think things have improved for younger people nowadays?
I think it really depends on what kind of upbringing you had and what kind of support you had and what the the values and of your parents were, how self-aware your parents were and how tuned into you they are or they were when you were a child. So for example, my kids right now, one of them, he's like my clone. He's just a boy. And his experience, I can identify with every part of his experience, like struggles to make friends, although does make friends, but it doesn't come easily to him, but is good at everything. My daughter, completely different to me. She's wildly confident when it comes to talking to people, super driven, determined, but academically, she's really struggling. And she's lost a lot of confidence in the last couple of years as school has become harder. And I realized for both of them, they need different things. Like my daughter, she needs sport, physical activity. She needs to see what she's good at, which is not necessarily academic. She needs extra support at school, but she needs also to own her strengths. And she's a powerhouse, and I know that if she can get through school with like learning, like, the basic stuff that we need to be able to function as adults, she's going to be amazing. And with my son, even though he finds everything easy, I know that his challenges are going to be the same as mine, with like needing to learn executive function skills, knowing how to organize himself and structure himself to be able to be fully functional in a career later on. And I want him to know himself. Like that's why I always allow him to follow his passions. Like he's mega into football right now. That's just a recent thing for the last few months. He wasn't into it before. And so like, yeah, helping him join a football team, just bought him the kit, which he's been wearing very proudly at home. And, and the other things that he's really into parkour as well. So, I'm helping him to follow his interests and supporting him in that. And I feel like as a child, my parents did not have the bandwidth to do that for me. I think they did the best they could. So I'm not bitter towards either one of them. They definitely did the best they could. But, I never found out, I never figured out what I was good at as a kid, other than school. And then it turned out to be really hard.
It's hard work growing up, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. So what do you want to know next? So I was a teacher, then I went into recruitment, and then I got demoted, I saw it as a demotion, into an admin role, which I failed at. I got performance managed out of that job. But at that was the point where I realized that there was such a thing as coaching. Well, that's really interesting because I was always trying to improve myself because I thought I was not enough, right? So I have to like do stuff so I can be enough. So I came across coaching, and so I was 28, 29 years old at that point. I thought, this is really good. Also, at the same time, I became fascinated by nutrition, and I thought I was going to become a nutritionist, but I didn't have the right A-levels or sort of background to do nutrition. So obviously, because I was interested in coaching and nutrition, I became a health coach, then went much more deeply into the life coaching, did some more qualifications and stuff. And that's what I've been doing now for 15 years. And within that, there have been some small pivots, which I think is relatively normal. But it took me it has been a sort of jiggedy journey. And now I know that, this is what I'm really, really good at. I'm just, I'm super sharp. I can read between the lines and hear what you're not saying as well as what you are saying. And I have the skill set to ask the right questions to get, to really create transformative experience for my clients. And I love it. And it doesn't feel like work when I'm doing it. It's just amazing.
I wonder if there's any aspect of the experience you had at 7 years old, just spending a lot of time observing. You said you were like the wallflower. I wonder if that is part of the influence in what's...
Yeah, because I would feel most comfortable sitting with the adults listening to their conversations.
Yeah.
Well, also, one of the great things my mum did was she always treated me as a real person, not as just a kid. So she would always be interested in my opinion. She would ask for my opinion. She would challenge my thinking. And, she wanted me to be critical. And so I know through her, I developed an ability to be more critical in my thinking. So that plus just sitting around listening to adults talk about stuff that I didn't understand, but I still found it interesting somehow. And all those books and, reading about people's lives.
And knights in shining armor.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
So I having ADHD myself, as soon as you said that you were put into admin, part of my soul died for you. So you were performance managed out of that. How did you feel? I mean, did you still have this sense of not knowing who you were and what your place was in the world and what you were going to do? It's just like, it just seems you had so many false starts.
It was a major crisis. I was crying a lot at home. I was angry. I felt like finally I found a company that I loved and I wanted to stay there. And they were like, I want to say there's always another aspect. There was a woman there who I think also felt threatened by me because I'm like, because of how I look, basically, right? And I was popular. Like I get on with people, right? I was popular with loads of people, and I think she felt threatened by me. And then she became my manager. Also, you know how it is when you have ADHD and you stick your foot in your mouth every so often and say something turns out to be offensive to somebody else. I think I may have said one of those things to her. And she never forgave me. And then I was kicked out and I was devastated because I thought, well, what am I supposed to do now? I have no idea what I'm good for. Luckily, as I was performance managed out, I already knew that I had dyslexia at that point. So I was like, you're discriminating against me. And I got a lawyer, a solicitor involved, and they paid me quite a big amount of money. So I had that to invest in training and but I was devastated. I was really devastated. And then I ended up doing some odd jobs here and there to earn money while I was doing the health coaches training. Then I basically hardly earned any money for about 3 years, I think. I was living off what they paid me.
And you were in this toxic relationship at the time as well?
So that happened at the end of the toxic relationship.
What happened? Sorry.
So I lost that job about 2 or 3 years before the end of the relationship.
Okay.
So I was still in that relationship. So I still had this like person who was trying to control what I ate and how I looked.
And arguably you're even more vulnerable now because you're not working.
He was always very, very supportive of me professionally, I have to say. So that was one major, major plus of his. But there was also stress, right? So, and my brother had died a few years before and I was mostly over that. But like I was still vulnerable, 100%.
You were saying that you got into coaching, and by that I imagine that you were being coached, were you? Or did you think that you heard about coaching, so you were going to be a coach for other people?
No, I trained to become initially a health coach. So because I'd become really fascinated by the relationship between what you eat and your body, how you felt. So I basically healed an allergy that had been plaguing me for years. In fact, 2 different allergies. One, which I had hives, also called urticaria, on my legs. Every time it got warm, I would be covered in these really, really hot, ugly, uncomfortable rashes on my legs. And then it would, go away over 2 or 3 weeks, and then it would get warm again and it would flare up again. And then I had a rash around my nose and around my chin. I'd always had clear skin. I'd never had acne or anything like that. I was really blessed. But, this thing just and it was scaly and red and inflamed, and I didn't know what to do with it. And I ended up going to a dermatologist who put me on antibiotics for 3 months. And then as soon as I came off the antibiotics, all of the rashes came back again. And then I went on the antibiotics again, and then I got the flu because my gut must have been totally starved of any kind of, good bacteria and stuff. And then I suddenly realized when I had the flu and I was in bed only eating chicken soup, all my rashes are gone. My skin suddenly looks amazing. And I worked out that it was dairy. And I tested for dairy allergies, by the way. But somehow dairy made me come up in these rashes. And not only did the one on my face disappear, but I never got the urticaria again, the hives. That is a mind fuck. How is it that that food, which, is a normal food for everybody to eat, has such a bad impact on me? how is it that no one else has figured this out? Like, why? Like, I am not a nutritional expert. I'm not like, how is it that I figured it out and nobody else has? So I was like, okay, people are not thinking about this clearly.
I can see that would make you incredibly zealous about getting out there and helping people with that.
Yeah. And also, like, a little bit of extra context. I was a binge eater. I was a massive comfort eater as a teenager. I was massively lonely. I could tell you more here about the drama, but I'm not going to.
Why not?
Oh, well, it's just like, it's endless. It's literally endless. Like, it, EastEnders, but worse. If they wrote this in EastEnders, they'd go, no, it's too much. It doesn't make sense anymore. But basically, my mum separated from my dad when I was 13. Then she had a few boyfriends. One of them was really dodgy and gave me the creeps. Luckily, she got rid of him. And then she had this nice boyfriend who was a bit cold towards me, but he was, she seemed happy. He seemed like a good guy. I was like 17, 18. She would first spend a night over at his, and then maybe a weekend. And then it got to the point where I was basically living by myself. And he didn't feel comfortable being around me because I was this, like, very, let's say, attractive to men teenager with massive boobs and, I don't know, a bit too friendly. So he didn't feel comfortable around me, which is, fine. And I respect that. But I ended up on my own most of the time. So I'd go to school, come back. My mum had a shop, which was very, very close by. It was like 100 meters away. So I'd go and see her, but I spent most of the evening by myself. And I ended up just eating. And it became my obsession. I was constantly obsessing about food. I couldn't stop thinking about food. I put on a lot of weight. And often body dysmorphia also comes with neurodivergence. Really, really tough,
But the sense of being on your own, again, is just such a common theme, right? The way, not so much now, but in your childhood and growing up. And I'm just trying to get some kind of measure on how that must have impacted you then and it impacted you now. Just a sense of abandonment, was it? Or just being on your own, that no one was around for you?
Yeah, I was extremely needy. And there was I had a best friend at the time who I put all of my needs onto. And I think on the one hand, she liked it because it made her feel special. And on the other hand, it must have been suffocating. And probably everyone had this sense about me. Like, nobody said it to my face, but everybody probably had this sense about me that I'm like a bit fragile, a bit needy. Everybody else was busy being a teenager. And I was sort of, forced to be independent too young, shall I say.
Yeah.
And it was painful and it was hard. I was lonely. So going back to the health coaching, I was also like obsessed with my body and my weight. I managed to lose the weight by the time I was in my sort of early 20s, 22, 23, something like that. But I was still obsessed with food and I was still obsessed with how heavy I was. And they talk about with neurodivergence that you have that you get addictions and stuff. And I was always a bit afraid of alcohol because I got drunk when I was 17 once at a party. And then I started crying and I did not stop crying the rest of the evening. And they had to call my mum to come and get me. I've never been into alcohol. I always felt like it made me out of control and I wanted to control how I felt. So I have been drunk a few times, but, it's definitely much less than the average, much, much, much less than the average British person, right? And it's only when I feel like completely comfortable with the people that I'm with that I will sort of let myself go like that. Never been into drugs, never smoked, but I was obsessed with food and I was obsessed with health. I think there's actually a word for someone like, bulimia. You have bulimia, you have anorexia, and there is a word that's equivalent, which is about people who are just absolutely fanatic about health. That was me. Absolutely fanatic.
And can that be a negative thing?
Yeah, because it was obsessive. It was absolutely obsessive.
In what way?
Like, not eating things if they weren't organic or healthy, if there was sugar in something. And I spent absolutely tons of money on organic stuff. And like the biggest dopamine hits I would get was going into an organic shop and finding something I'd never seen before. It's like, oh, I've never tried that before. I have to have it.
Wow.
Spent a lot of money on supplements. Yeah, I swear all my money went. I was obsessed and still am, but just I consciously try and relax about it. Still have my supplements here. Look, I've got like them on my desk. Got another one here. But it's just, I think it's a bit more measured now. Yeah.
So you're obsessed about health for yourself. At what point did you realize that you could translate this passion, addiction, or, whatever you want to call it, to actually making money for you with other people?
I mean, I like that you said making money, because I tried to make money, but I was an absolute failure at making money. As in, I think I like made $2,000 or $3,000, my first couple of years of doing this. And then I trained to become, I did further coaches training. I trained in coactive coaching. That's actually where I met my husband. That was a very pivotal moment in my life. That changed a lot for me, meeting my husband, for a number of reasons. He's really been super, super good for me.
Were you in coaching during this period?
Do you know what? No, I got coached while I was being trained, but I never really properly had coaching. And it's really funny that's the way that it worked out, because I wasn't eating my own cooking. I was a chef who was not eating their own cooking. And also I had, thanks to my very dear mum, a complete block around any kind of therapy, which would have really helped me as well. But I had a major, major block. I was terrified of therapists. I tell you why. I know why. My mum had commented that maybe my gran was a bipolar, and maybe my dad was bipolar. My dad definitely had mental health issues. And the comment was always how similar I was to that side of the family. And, and I would suffer from depression and anxiety. And I was terrified of becoming bipolar, because for me, there was a massive stigma around that. So I just tried to bury everything and survive. Yeah.
Is your dad still with us?
No, he died when I was 17. See, the drama continues.
Wow.
Oh, and like just in case you thought that wasn't enough, 4 months before he died, he married a 22-year-old. He was 50. The friend of that 22-year-old was the one who was pregnant with my brother's child. The two girls came together. They were actually lodging at my dad's house with my brother there. And one picked my dad, the other one picked my brother. Then my dad died. He died in a car accident. He and his new wife were going to move to Poland, back to Poland. And he was on the Autobahn in Germany. And they were in a car accident. And they were okay. But he didn't have a mobile phone at the time, because it was 1997 and mobile phones were still not, for everyone at that time. Got out, tried to get to the phone on the other side of the motorway. And then he got slammed a couple of times by cars. So he died 2 weeks later in intensive care. Never got invited I did get invited to the funeral, but at the time I had no idea what I was doing. And I was in the middle of my mock exams at school. I was like, well, it's a bit inconvenient. I don't know. I don't even know how to get there.
And was this coincided with the time when you were saying about you being at home mainly on your own?
Yeah, and obviously I had contact with my mum. She wasn't absent.
Yeah.
And if I had asked her to be with me, she would have. But because I was such a pleaser and wanting to be agreeable, I was like, no, I just want you to be happy. You go and do the things that you need to do.
What impact did your dad's death have on you, do you think? In a way, we've already looked at this time of your life a little bit, but it's almost like I want to go back to that and look at it through the lens of this new information that we've had.
Bouncing back and forth, aren't we?
The clue's in the name of the podcast.
Yeah, that's also true. Listen, like I just for completeness, obviously your history is the part of the fabric of who you are, and I don't actually talk or even think about those things very much these days. So it's interesting for me that we're going there, and yes, they are quite emotive for me still. There's still some trauma there, but those particular incidents I don't think have a particularly big impact on who I am today, but they did impact my journey along the way, right? I didn't grieve for my dad. I didn't know how to. For me, I quite estranged from him. I didn't live with him anymore since the age of 13. So that was like a 4-year period. I barely saw him. I have this memory of him knocking on the door of the flat where I was living and sobbing, feeling sorry for himself. And I thought that he was really pathetic. But I had no idea, I had no idea of what he must have been going through. I didn't have the ability to, look at it from his perspective at that time. I'm still selfish, self-obsessed, egotistical child at the time. And I had my mock exams, and that's what I was like, school is my safe place at the time. I need to focus on my exams. So that's what I did. And it was only when my brother died in 2004 when I suddenly started to grieve my dad. And I was like, where the hell are you? I need you right now. Like my mum totally fell to pieces when my brother died. And she could barely speak for 6 months, right? It was awful. It was the beginning of that toxic relationship. And it was such an immensely tough time. And then I got really angry at my dad, and I went through like the grief process. But I had been quite estranged to him at that time. And so in a way, I feel like I grew up fatherless for most of my life. I have some happy memories of him when I was really small. He was incredibly talented artist, and you gave him a piece of paper and a pair of scissors, he would make this most intricate, beautiful creation. And I still remember them now. And still now, if I was to see that, I would still be amazed, because it was just so incredible. But because of his mental health issues and the financial stresses and life not working out for him, he didn't have the bandwidth for the kids. So I didn't also remember him doing a lot of experimenting in the kitchen and making food that was sometimes like really weird, not at all tasty.
It seemed like he's passed his artistic gifts and interests onto you. You've talked a little bit about your interest in art and creativity and things.
And my mum has those too, by the way. So they were, my mum is now retired, and she paints as her hobby, and she does beautiful things. And she's also an incredibly talented interior designer, even though she's never done that professionally. So
the Ania that we've spent an hour or so just being with, the different parts of her journey, if all I knew of you was the half an hour, 40 minutes that we spent on our intro call, a few weeks ago, there'd be no hint of comprehension that you contained this trauma and loss and things that I'm struggling to understand. I've never had one person close to me die, let alone two. And the aloneness and stuff. And I'm really, really curious to know how are you not a quivering wreck?
I think that, and it's a really good question. And this is why I'm so open to sharing my story, because I hope that if anyone has had any, similar kind of experience to me,
at any level,
right, that they can feel inspired, that does not determine the future, the end of your life.
When did you first realize that for yourself?
Do you know what? My mum is an optimist, right? And she always said to me, if you don't like something, change it. And so I always thought, okay, I just need to keep changing things until I get to the thing that I like. And I think I'm also an optimist. So I always thought there's going to be something better. And maybe that's because of all of the books that I read and, the people that I observed around me, with normal families. I'm like, yeah, that does exist. So it is possible for me too, right?
Mm.
And so I always felt motivated to do more. I remember some books that I read when I was quite young. Again, thanks to my mum and also my love of reading. My mum's also a book. Actually, my mum is very similar to me. I'm very similar to her. I read Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist, which I'm sure you must have read.
Yeah, lovely.
Had such a profound impact on me. I was like, oh, okay. So there are paths that I can take and people I can meet. There are possibilities. I'd love to read that book again, because I actually don't even remember the story.
Do you know what? I just thought exactly the same thing when you said that.
Yeah. But it had a big impact on me. And also Jonathan Livingston Seagull,
Mm-hmm.
so I read those books and I suddenly felt like they had a really big impact on me. And I always felt like hopeful, like there is, even if I'm struggling right now, there is something more that's available. And I've also had the ability always to appreciate the small things. I can appreciate a book. I can appreciate sunny day. I can appreciate like a kindness from somebody. So I think those things always kept me going. Even with that relationship that I had, I know that it wasn't all bad and that I had my part to play in it. And even though I'm glad I'm not in it anymore, I don't hate the guy. I think we were both like just both clueless, really, and just doing the best we could, and it was pretty bad what we were doing. But I hope for his sake that he's also learned and grown and developed and has sort of been able to let go of the controlling tendencies that he had at the time. And I've always read and I've always been interested in personal development, and I've always found it really exciting that you can. I think my self-awareness and my observation of people and sort of willingness to lean into the discomfort of growth, right? Because growth can be painful. Growing pains can be uncomfortable. I think that is what's brought me to where I am today. And I have been lucky in meeting some wonderful people along the way. People who've really, like, my mum's always believed in me. She's obviously my greatest fan and I adore her. And we are very close. But, other people, there have been moments where other people have seen really positive things in me. And I think I clung on to that, that there's good stuff here. Also, I didn't realize that I was intelligent because I had very intelligent friends at school as well who like aced every subject. I didn't really realize that I was intelligent until sort of later on, reflecting that all of my friends at uni that I did have, they were all oddballs and they were all mega, mega intelligent. They were the ones that got the first, like by landslide, And then I realized that they wouldn't be friends with me if they didn't find me a sort of a match, intellectually a match with them. It was little things like, oh, that's interesting. Actually, all of my friends are mega, mega intelligent. So by default, that must mean something about me. And then, and then I'd be brilliant at interviews. I've always aced interviews. And then I felt like I disappointed in the job itself. I was like, so promising. So I was always like, there's got to be something there, right? And then I got really deep into personal development, like, since my like late 20s and like onwards from there. I mean, I've read so many books on that and gone to conferences and done coaching, been coached eventually, right? Eventually I did get myself coached. I spent 10 years under, working under a very big American coach. And there I learned a lot.
Is there anything in that journey that you just touched on there that you think made the biggest difference for you?
I have to say, meeting my husband was a very important moment in my life. So I met him when I was 33 on a coach's training. I love coaching and I was in love with it from the start. And I always sure there's much more that I could do even today, right, to develop myself. But my confidence was still not great at that time. And he has always really just seen my soul, and has been a raving fan from the start. And because he is so accomplished, he's very, very accomplished, I respect his opinion. And that's really, really helped me. And he's always challenged me. I do tend to withdraw into my comfort zone if I get overwhelmed or it feels too much or too complex. When things get like I can't hold all of the information in my head, I tend to go, okay, stick my head in the hole, wait till it disappears. But that meant that I had stagnated. I said at the beginning with my coaching, I wasn't really earning much money. I didn't value myself enough. And actually, he really, answering that question, he helped me tremendously. And the other thing was realizing that I am neurodiverse and I haven't been diagnosed with ADHD, but I completely relate to, I identify as ADHD. I do.
Well, I have been, we had this conversation on an intro call. I have been diagnosed, and in that call and this call too, just resonating so much of me is resonating with what you said as your experiences growing up and executive function and, getting a sense of overwhelm so much in your head, you just want to kind of let it all go and go away and hide. I'm sure the listener may well resonate with that as well.
Yeah, I'm waiting for a diagnosis as so many other people. Or assessment, should I say. But that actually, understanding that finally, suddenly a lot of things clicked. And also that really helped my confidence, because for many years, I still felt like I'd failed professionally.
Yeah.
That I was, bits of job here, bits of job there, no real career. Longest place I'd ever stayed in, I'd stayed in like for 18 months until I worked for this American coach. But then I was left alone to do my own thing. And as long as I was like hitting my targets, they left me alone. So it was good environment for me. But I was never like a superstar in that field. I have very loyal clients, but I didn't, it's also a sales organization. So anyway, long story short, I wanted to figure out marketing and how to market myself. And I spent so many thousands of euros on marketing courses that promised the world, and I kept failing to deliver at the end. And by the third one, I was like, okay, hold on a minute. I've been reading all this stuff about ADHD. I know I'm not stupid. This stuff isn't rocket science. The reason why I can't do it must be the ADHD. And then I finally hired an ADHD coach. And I was like, and that really improved my confidence, because suddenly I realized that I have gotten through all of these challenges without any extra support through A-levels, through uni, through doing a postgraduate in education, my career. I survived all of that without any extra help, which I clearly needed. And I suddenly felt proud of myself for the first time.
Yeah, you should be. You should be fucking proud of yourself.
I am fucking proud of myself. And I also now know where I need help. So I work with my husband now, and he and I know that we have to sit down every morning and talk about what the priorities are for the week, what they are for the day, what's in the schedule. Because if either one of us don't do that, we work very hard on random stuff.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that. What is the name of your coach, your ADHD coach?
Brianna Plyler. Happily give a shout out to her. She's on Instagram. She's amazing, outstanding coach. She really helped me to understand like the executive functions challenges, which I have. I'm sure that I will work with her again in the future, because she's so good. She's so sharp, and she is absolutely wonderful. And I've never felt so unshamed in my life, because I've been carrying shame for such a long time for not having succeeded and not have been that high achiever that I was at school professionally.
How did you come across her, and why did you choose her?
So I found her on Instagram. I was like scrolling, like reading all of these ADHD things, and I put in ADHD coach, and I watched several of her videos, and I'm like, yeah, I do all of that stuff, and she's so good. And then
what made you start looking for that in the first place?
Because my children. First, my son was having challenges at school, and all my traumas were triggered, and I was like, oh, I need to help him.
Yeah.
And we ended up going to a psychologist, and she said, well, let's test him for autism. That was the first test she did. And that came out as, what's the word? It's something. I can't think of the word. So he has lots of signs, lots of, symptoms of autism, but she didn't want to diagnose him because they weren't so obvious that to slam a label on him. But then she said, but he might have ADHD, but let's test that later. And inconclusive, that's the word I was looking for. So it's inconclusive. And he was assessed for ADHD as well. That also came back inconclusive, but I think it's because he's really clever. And the two, autism and ADHD, can kind of like appear to cancel each other out, even though they don't. So anyway, it was my kids that led me down that whole ADHD rabbit hole. I had no clue beforehand. And because my son is so similar to me, that's why I was like, oh, if he does, then it's got to come from me.
Yeah. And maybe your experience was similar to mine, that I saw a video randomly and it was like it was a video of a professor of neurodevelopmental biology who's specialized in ADHD for 30 years giving a talk at a medical conference. It wasn't even a YouTube kind of, to camera. And I just thought every second of the presentation was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I remember I forwarded, I then went down the rabbit hole of YouTube, looked at more of his videos, and I sent my wife a couple of them. And she watched them and she replied, she said, I always thought there was something wrong with you. I thought it was, she's always joked that I've got Asperger's or autism or whatever, but I said, well, maybe it's ADHD. And that was last summer. And I was like, yeah. So so much of what
and for full context, I see it as a gift, not something wrong with me. I really think that it makes me fucking awesome at the things that I do.
Yeah.
And I was going to add, I diagnosed myself with dyslexia in the same way. I was sitting in a lecture while I was training to be a teacher, and there was like 1 hour of special educational needs in this whole year of training, which is not enough, nowhere near enough. So I was sitting in this lecture and they were talking about dyslexia and the symptoms of dyslexia and how to identify it. I was like, hold on a minute, they're talking about me. What? Then I went to the student office and I said, I think I have dyslexia. And they're like, okay, we'll do a screening test with you. And they put me on a computer to do like a screening. And, and I passed the test as a sort of neurotypical person would. I'm like, I'm really sorry. I have to disagree with this test because I have really good coping strategies and I could basically cheat. I cheated. And so then they sent me to a psychologist and the psychologist went, oh yeah, definitely. Like, look at all of your results after 4 hours of testing.
Kind of indicate of your intelligence that we've spoken about and had.
Actually, that one didn't talk about my intelligence, although I did say that I have superior spatial awareness. So I'm very good at parallel parking. I should have probably become an architect, but I didn't because nobody told me that was an option.
This, you touched a couple of times this sense of your life or you personally being a failure up to a certain point in time. Do you think that is, and that's totally true for me as well. It's really only in this iteration of my life that I really feel that I'm kind of hitting my groove. I've often thought of to myself, if not spoken publicly, that I'm a failure. I got divorced, I started businesses and they failed, and I see people that are close to me. My younger brother started a business 25 years ago, hugely successful, and you can't help but compare yourself.
Sure.
Really, in some way. So there is that. Well, and also having other people compared to you. So at school, I was told, why can't you be like your older brother and sister?
That's so awful.
Yeah. So I guess my question is that just for people like us with ADHD that are neurodiverse, or do you think there is some aspect of false notion of success and failure that exists in society in some way?
So that is a really interesting topic. And because I've done so many hours of coaching with so many different people now, I will tell you that it is typical for a lot of people with neurodivergence. I think it's probably very typical for a neurodivergent person. For a neurotypical person, I think that childhood traumas also come into play and shape the path that they take, but also things like, culture, family culture, but wider societal culture as well, have a big impact. And I think that's why a neurotypical person can also have a personal crisis, because they can reach a certain point in their life and go, hold on, I've been living someone else's life. I've been living out my parents' fantasy for me, but this is not actually who I am and what I want. And I think I do think that it can happen also for neurotypical people, but it's probably not as typical as it is for a neurodivergent person to feel like that.
That's interesting. And you've got boots on the ground in terms of empirical evidence with people that you've been coaching. Yeah, that's interesting. What is success and failure though to you? What do those words mean?
Wow, I love this subject because the business that I've now started with my husband is called Holistic Wealth with a W, holistic, whole, holistic.
Ah, okay, clever. See what you did there.
Yeah. it's wealth beyond money. And I used to think that success is being rich and having lots of big stuff. I think that's probably a lot of people's definition of success. But ultimately, it's not true. It's not true. You are successful in life if you have a community around you who love you and who have your back. I mean, I think actually that's the ultimate measure of success. Doing work that fulfills you, being able, obviously you need to be able to pay your bills, have a roof over your head, food on the table, right? Those are like basic needs of everybody.
Yeah. Maslow's hierarchy. Yeah.
Exactly. But if you can do that and have people around you who love you, who you love, a community, you have good health, you don't have to look like a supermodel, but you have good health and you are able to do things every day that you love, that bring you joy and bring you energy. I mean, then you've won. Everything else on top of that is a bonus.
Preach it.
Yeah. And that's why famous people, get depression and who have like these crises, and you think, why, you've got it all. They don't have it all. They may not know who they are. They might not have they might have self-esteem issues. They might just suffer from depression, because some people do, and not feel alone. Like, I think loneliness is like the biggest killer of all, not feeling like you have anyone who understands you or that you can rely on must be the worst thing. I'm not going to call that a failure, because I don't think people do it on purpose to themselves. But obviously, if you want a community in this day and age, you have to invest in it, because we don't live in communities anymore. Like, you have
when you
to
say invest in it, what do you
them.
mean? Not
You have to build them. You have to go out there and talk to people and connect.
You have to make an effort, you mean?
Yeah. Because we don't live with our aunties and uncles and cousins and, people who you're related to, or like intergenerational, like multi-generational friendships. We don't live in those communities anymore. So we have to go out there and build them.
To our loss, I think.
Yeah, I 100% believe that is a big loss of society today.
Your children will, the fact that you said earlier about your mum coming to live with you, will just have such a great positive impact on your children's development.
Yeah, I see it already. When she comes to visit, she's with us for a week or two at a time, and I can see it when she's around. They're so much calmer, and happier, and also, she adds another element, like another dimension. My husband and I work a lot. Like, we have like the house to take care of and stuff, and we don't necessarily have as much time for fun stuff. Like, I make space every day for them, but it's not the same as having someone there who can sit with you for 2.5 hours and play rummy card or Risk.
How old are your children?
7 and almost 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a beautiful, inspiring, tragic, funny journey time that we spent together, because that's what your life has been like. And it's just so beautiful to come to this point where, thinking back to the 7-year-old Ania, who didn't know who she was, didn't know what she wanted.
Well,
what do you think 7-year-old Ania would think if she came across you now today?
Probably, I want to be her. I'm proud of who I've become, right? And this is, I've cultivated the person who I've become. It's not been by accident. And I think that's accessible to everybody. Yeah,
I agree. And what an inspiring way to start drawing our conversation to a close. I mean, we could, if we wanted to, carry on talking forever, but
I've got more pivots for you if you want.
We'll have to come back for second edition, third edition. Yeah. There is a question which I ask all my guests at the end of our time, and that is to tell me who they would like me to have a non-straight line journey with, like this, on their behalf, so to speak. So you see a new episode of the podcast come down onto your phone, and when you see who my conversation is with for that particular episode, you say to yourself, oh man, I really want to hear that. I really want to hear that story, that journey. Whose name is there? Who's the first name that came to mind when I asked the question?
I have a client of mine who I've been working with for a while. He has such an interesting story. It's just a question of like who's actually willing to go there and share the story.
Do you think she would be?
I will ask her. Yeah. On a famous level, I think there are so many interesting people out there. Like Emma Thompson, for example, is like an incredible actress.
I'll take that. I'll take Emma Thompson.
Yeah.
So if you saw Not a Straight Line with Emma Thompson, you'd be like, I want to listen to that.
Definitely. Yeah. And I actually wonder, does she? I know that she did acting at university, and she was like part of like the crew of other like Hugh Laurie and all of these other like people who've become famous. But I wonder whether she feels like her life was linear or whether she felt like it was. Yeah,
we'll find out.
Good. Thanks. I look forward to that episode. Can I be a guest?
Thanks for setting the bar high. Yeah, that's great. Just get my guests to build my future guest list for me, and 100 or so episodes with people. Thanks for that suggestion. Yeah,
you are very welcome, and I will ask around because I know many interesting people for you.
It's been great, Ania. Thank you so much for sharing your life with us. It's been a joy and a privilege to share it with you.
My pleasure.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Not a Straight Line. If this conversation helped to reorient your internal compass or inspired you in any way, please let us know by heading to podcast.notastraightline.life/rate and leave a rating and review. Thanks as always to Matthew Bliss of MB Podcast Services for his exquisite engineering of this episode. If you'd like him to help you with your podcast, contact details are in the show notes. And if you'd like to be a guest on the show, or there's someone whose non-straight line journey you'd just love to hear, then please visit podcast.notastraightline.life/guest. Thanks for being here with me, and I'll see you next week for another amazing, deep, inspiring non-straight line journey. Love you.